What if the most iconic love stories of old Hollywood were never told because they were forbidden? Behind the silver screen charm and studio-polished smiles, many stars hid who they truly loved. Today, we unlock the secret lives of 22 legendary actors who were gay in secret. Stay tuned. These hidden truths will change how you see Hollywood forever. Rock Hudson. When Rock Hudson strode across the silver screen, audiences didn't just watch. They swooned. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches, with a jawline sculpted by studio gods, Hudson became the ultimate masculine ideal. But behind closed doors, Roy Fitzgerald lived a life meticulously curated to avoid scandal. Studio fixer Henry Wilson transformed him into a Hollywood icon, teaching him to walk, talk, and flirt like a man. When Confidential magazine threatened to expose him, a staged marriage to Phyllis Gates saved his career, temporarily. His Malibu mansion became a double life haven. Glitzy parties with press by day, intimate gatherings with surfers and artists by night. Elizabeth Taylor, his confidant, once remarked he had a laugh softer than any actress she ever met. Hudson's public AIDS diagnosis in 1984 shattered the illusion that Hollywood's dreamboat was invincible and straight. His final years humanized him more than 1,000 screen roles ever could. In the margins of one old script, he scribbled, "I won't apologize for the life that lets me breathe." In an era when being gay could destroy a career, Rock Hudson dared to exhale. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift didn't just act. He imploded emotions onto film. His haunted eyes in From Here to Eternity spoke of deeper wars than the script ever hinted. Monty, as friends called him, arrived in Hollywood with New York theater grit and a refusal to play PR games. He turned down fan clubs, avoided staged romances, and spent more time with playwrights and photographers than starlets. Elizabeth Taylor became his closest friend, an occasional decoy. She called him Bessie May, and they'd whisper secrets between takes. But behind that magnetic intensity was a man buckling under secrets. His sexuality, whispered among industry circles, was a truth he never dared voice publicly. A near-fatal car crash in 1956 left his face altered and his resolve crumbling. The real damage, friends said, was internal. The collision between the life he wanted and the one Hollywood demanded. After his death, a posthumous essay surfaced. "The saddest thing I know is loving quietly. The happiest, too." In his silence, Monty redefined vulnerability for a generation. His truth never made headlines, but it lingers in every anguished close-up. Tab Hunter. Tab Hunter was the 1950s American dream in motion. Sun-bleached hair, all-American smile, and a Letterman jacket straight out of fantasy. But Warner Brothers had no idea what to do when gossip columns caught wind of his secret. After being arrested at a party filled with male dancers, studio heads moved fast. Their fix? A faux romance with Natalie Wood. Tab grinned his way through red carpets, all while quietly falling for Anthony Perkins. The pair roller skated after midnight on studio backlots and exchanged love letters written between takes. But Hollywood had no script for love like theirs. Tab's memoir, Confidential, lifted the veil decades later. In it, he revealed panic attacks, the heartbreak of hiding, and his pet horse named Harlow, the only one who didn't care who I kissed. By the time the book hit shelves in 2005, Tab had waited 50 years to come out. He wrote, spoke, and smiled his way out of the shadows. At last, his leading man moment came not on screen, but in truth. Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins terrified audiences as Norman Bates, but the real horror lay in the silence that consumed his personal life. Soft-spoken, thoughtful, and painfully shy, Perkins found refuge in art and quiet romances with other men, most notably Tab Hunter. Their affair was brief but intense, and doomed by publicists who told Perkins even a whisper could ruin his future. So Tony dated actresses in front of cameras while secretly meeting lovers in Central Park at night. Hitchcock once slyly defended him to the press. "He stays in character, never brings girls to set." Perkins eventually married photographer Barry Berenson and fathered 2 sons. But his private journals, published after his death from AIDS in 1992, revealed the ache that never left. He still dreamed of Tab's surfer laugh. Hollywood's boy next door had been living behind locked doors his entire life. Ones even Norman Bates wouldn't dare open. George Nader. George Nader had the looks of a matinee idol, square jaw, radiant smile, and a kindness that set him apart from the macho posturing of other 1950s stars. Universal saw him as Rock Hudson's heir, and for good reason. They shared not only a studio, but a secret. Both men were managed by Henry Wilson, who built careers while simultaneously guarding private lives with whispered threats and faux romances. When scandal loomed in the 1950s, Wilson allegedly sacrificed Nader's rising stardom to protect Hudson, leaking gossip to shield his more bankable client. George never recovered professionally, but in real life, he thrived. He lived openly with his partner, Mark Miller, and their Doberman, hosting weekend brunches so warm even jaded insiders left smiling. In 1978, Nader published Chrome, a sci-fi novel featuring a gay love story, one of the first of its kind. "I already lost a career to rumors," he said. "Why not gain a new one with truth?" George Nader never became a household name, but he became something more enduring, a quiet revolutionary who loved out loud when it still came at a price. Van Johnson. Van Johnson's all-American charm lit up the 1940s like a war bond poster. With freckles and a choir boy grin, he was MGM's golden boy. But off-screen, his story was anything but wholesome fantasy. After a 1943 car crash nearly killed him, whispers about his recovery companion, actor Keenan Wynn, circulated. To squash rumors, Johnson married Wynn's ex-wife, Eve Abbott, in what insiders later described as a studio-arranged lavender marriage. Abbott herself admitted Louis B. Mayer orchestrated it all. Van played the role dutifully in the press, posing as the perfect husband. But behind the scenes, his closest relationships were with handsome dancers and decorators, including long-term roommate Charles Boswell. In Palm Springs, they lived quietly, Johnson referring to Boswell with a wink as "my cook and confidant." In the 1970s, when asked about the rumors, Van replied with a smirk, "Freckles hide a multitude of secrets." He never came out publicly, but those who knew him recall poker nights with chorus boys and subtle smiles that said everything the tabloids wouldn't print. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was Hollywood's ultimate swashbuckler, his swordplay in The Mark of Zorro only matched by his devastating gaze. But beyond the Errol Flynn comparisons and studio publicity stunts, Power led a life full of whispered truths. His time in the Marines introduced him to deep, coded relationships, letters to close male friends filled with affection, masked as camaraderie. Rumors swirled around his friendship with actor Cesar Romero, with whom he vacationed frequently, always sans female companions. Studio bosses arranged marriages, first to Annabella and then Deborah Menardos, to keep suspicions at bay. Even Annabella admitted that Tyrone's heart belonged elsewhere, perhaps to those midnight talks over cognac with male friends. He died tragically mid-scene in 1958. Among his personal effects was a pressed gardenia from Romero's hillside home and a journal noting birthdays of "my dearest companions." Whether coded love or brotherhood, Power's heart told a story his films never dared. He was a man who gave Hollywood its fantasy, while privately clinging to a truth it wasn't ready to hear. James Dean. James Dean didn't walk, he stormed. A blur of rebellion, sexual ambiguity, and tragic youth, Dean became legend before he became a man. But behind that myth was a fragile, fiercely private soul. Before he was famous, Dean lived with older radio director Rogers Brackett, fueling rumors of a mentorship that doubled as a relationship. He was seen sneaking into repertory theaters barefoot, rehearsing with male dancers for research. In public, he dated Pierangeli, at least on studio paper. But when she married someone else, Dean sat alone outside the church, smoking in full view of paparazzi. "Maybe she loved Jimmy the Myth," he'd say, "not Jimmy the Mess." After his fatal Porsche crash at 24, a safety deposit box revealed poems signed with male initials, and a photograph of him kissing another man backstage. Gossip columnist Joe Hyams later confirmed Dean admitted to being bisexual during a boozy confession in New York. Dean never labeled himself. Why should I care what people think? I'm not going to live forever, he said. And he didn't. But his shadow looms large because the labels never mattered. Only the fire inside. Raymond Burr. Before Raymond Burr commanded the courtroom as Perry Mason, he built an entire backstory, complete with a wife, a child, and a tragic widowhood. None of it was true. Reporters later discovered there were no marriage records, no death certificates, just a series of stories crafted to shield his real life. In reality, Burr spent over 3 decades with actor Robert Benavides, a man he met on the Perry Mason set and never left. Together, they raised orchids, ran a vineyard, and bought a 4,000-acre ranch. Burr feared another Hollywood firing. RKO had allegedly dropped him years earlier due to suspicions about his sexuality, so he layered his life with fiction to preserve his career. After Burr's death in 1993, Benavides finally stepped into the light, introducing himself at winery tastings as Ray's partner. Hidden within the vines was a special orchid hybrid named Phalaenopsis roberta, a tribute to the love that dared not speak aloud. Burr's scripts were courtroom dramas, but his real story was about quiet devotion in a world not yet ready to witness it. Richard Chamberlain. Richard Chamberlain made America swoon as Dr. Kildare, the heartthrob of early 1960s television. With his flawless cheekbones and whisper-soft voice, he became the face of restrained masculinity. But off-screen, Chamberlain lived a life of calculated secrecy. Tabloids often speculated about his bachelor status, especially when he retreated to his Hawaiian estate with actor-producer Martin Rabbit. The two shared a life away from the paparazzi, even co-starring as lovers in Alan Quatermain in The Lost City of Gold. Yet when The Advocate outed him in 1989, Chamberlain panicked, denying the truth for fear of career backlash. It wasn't until 2003 in his memoir, Shattered Love, that he finally let the sunlight in. "The closet is a suffocating coffin," he wrote. "I needed sunlight." Chamberlain's confession became a turning point for closeted stars who once feared honesty would end their careers. He didn't just act in epics, he lived one. And in the final act, he chose authenticity. Farley Granger. Farley Granger's charm was boyish, irreverent, and always just a wink away from mischief. Hitchcock fans remember him from roping strangers on a train, but Granger's true intrigue lived beyond the frame. Thrust into fame at 21, he found himself juggling starlets for publicity and playwrights for pleasure. One night, it might be Shelley Winters. The next, Leonard Bernstein. But it was Broadway writer Arthur Lawrence who captured his heart and his wit. Granger never saw labels, only connections. His memoir, Include Me Out, was refreshingly candid about his affairs with men and women. When asked late in life whether he was gay or bi, Granger laughed. "Past? Darling, I'm still alive." In an age of silence, Granger was a whisper that turned into a chuckle, then a confession. He defied the closet not with grand declarations, but with living honestly, one love story at a time. Anthony Perkins and Tab Hunter. Their names appeared separately on marquees, but behind the studio facade, Anthony Perkins and Tab Hunter lived a love story Hollywood wasn't ready for. Introduced by director Joshua Logan, the two young stars, one brooding, the other boyish, fell for each other in a world that demanded they fake it all. Roller skating through backlots and trading monologues in whispered tones, they carved out secret joy. But pressure cracked the fairy tale. Perkins' agent warned that exposure would wreck his career. Tab was forced into high-profile dates with Natalie Wood. Even after the romance ended, neither man forgot. Perkins later married, Hunter wrote a memoir, but they never escaped each other's orbit. Perkins died in 1992. Hunter came out in 2005. The final chapter? A photograph once surfaced. Two young men in the shadows, smiling just out of focus. Love, as it turns out, can echo louder when unspoken. William Haynes. Before William "Billy" Haynes became one of Hollywood's top box office draws in the 1920s, he was already living openly with the love of his life, former sailor Jimmy Shields. The studio loved his wisecracking charm on screen, but panicked when his off-screen life made headlines. MGM mogul Louis B. Mayer demanded he enter a lavender marriage. Haynes refused. "I'm already married," he quipped, "to the man waiting at home." And just like that, his career ended. But Billy didn't vanish. He reinvented. He became one of the most sought-after interior designers in Hollywood, transforming estates for Joan Crawford, Ronald Reagan, and countless stars. When anti-gay thugs attacked their home in 1936, Billy and Jimmy fought them off with garden hoses and grit. Joan Crawford once called them the happiest married couple in town. They stayed together for nearly 50 years. At Billy's funeral, Crawford held Jimmy's hand and whispered, "You two beat the system." Long before the term existed, William Haynes was out, and proud. Sal Mano. Sal Mano broke hearts as the troubled Plato in Rebel Without a Cause, a role eerily close to his own life. Off-screen, Sal struggled with his sexuality in a Hollywood that rewarded secrets. He was deeply infatuated with James Dean, and his diary entries told of lost lines and racing hearts every time Dean looked his way. Publicists paired him with Natalie Wood, but she later admitted their dates were just mutual cover. In the 60s, as his teen idol status faded, Mano bravely stepped into roles that reflected his truth. In Fortune and Men's Eyes, he portrayed a gay prisoner, confronting taboos others dodged. Hollywood didn't reward his honesty, it punished it. His career stalled. He turned to indie theater and passion projects, drawing from gay literature and life. Then in 1976, tragedy struck. Returning from rehearsal, Sal was stabbed outside his West Hollywood apartment. Initial reports assumed a hate crime. The truth, a robbery, did little to dim the symbolic loss. Sal Mano wasn't just a lost boy of Hollywood. He was a pioneer who chose honesty over easy fame. Clifton Webb. Clifton Webb defined dapper. With his sharp tongue, tailored suits, and Mother Maybelle always nearby, he radiated elegant bachelorhood on screen and off. Audiences adored him in Laura and Cheaper by the Dozen, where his characters often echoed his real-life fastidiousness. But behind the arch wit and perfect posture was a life carefully lived just beyond public grasp. Webb's sexuality was Hollywood's worst-kept secret. Noel Coward once invited him to the French Riviera. Clifton declined, citing rehearsals. When MGM suggested a stage romance, he deadpanned, "My dear, the only match for me is society itself." He never married, never denied, never confirmed. His sharp humor shielded a private world filled with close male companions, martini-fueled gossip, and quiet evenings tending his garden. When he died in 1966, Maybelle followed soon after, as if her purpose had ended. In a town that traded in illusions, Clifton Webb remained an enigma, but one suspects he'd prefer it that way. Carrie Grant. Carrie Grant wasn't just a movie star, he was the movie star. Suave, witty, impossibly handsome, and always a little too perfect to be true. Born Archie Leach, he shared a Santa Monica beach house with fellow actor Randolph Scott for over a decade. Gossip columns dubbed it Bachelor Hall, printing cheerful photos of them in matching aprons, grilling steaks. Studio execs gritted their teeth. Hedda Hopper once asked when he'd marry. "Who says I'm not married to Randolph?" he shot back. Publicists rewrote the quote. Multiple arranged marriages followed, but ex-wives later admitted that Scott was the real constant. Letters from Grant to Scott surfaced after his death, filled with inside jokes, beach memories, and a cocktail recipe called Two Bachelors in Love. He never came out, never defined himself. "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant," he once said. "Even I want to be Cary Grant." Perhaps the greatest role he ever played was himself in disguise. Rudolph Valentino. Rudolph Valentino's death in 1926 sparked mass hysteria. Women fainted, men cried. Thousands lined New York streets for a glimpse of the casket. But behind the Latin lover image was a man constantly hounded by whispers. His first marriage ended without consummation. Rumors swirled of coded meetings, midnight strolls with playwright Paul Ivano, and silent glances shared with men in jazz clubs. His studio spun everything into mystery. He leaned into it, once famously quipping, "What is love without a little disguise?" A mysterious floral arrangement at his funeral bore an unsigned card. "To the one who taught me new steps in the dark." The tabloids never found the sender, but decades later, scholars would. Valentino might have loved men, women, or the very idea of romance itself, but his greatest seduction was how he made America fall in love without ever truly revealing himself. John Gilgood. Sir John Gilgood was theater royalty, able to quote Hamlet from memory and adjust his bow tie mid-sonnet, but in 1953, a quiet scandal almost ended it all. Gilgood was arrested for soliciting a man in a London public restroom. Newspapers pounced. The scandal could have ruined him. Instead, it transformed him. When he returned to the stage in A Day by the Sea, the audience gave him a thunderous standing ovation before he even spoke. The applause brought tears to his eyes and resilience to his soul. "I never go to the gents now," he joked later. "I might run into critics." Gilgood never again hid. He lived discreetly with his partner, stage manager Martin Hensler, and filled their years with antiques, gossip-laced letters, and Christmas cards featuring Shakespeare and Santa hats. In later life, playwright Alan Bennett said Gilgood's ordeal put the stamp of silliness on the law. He remained sharp, droll, and proudly himself, proof that even a knight could rise from scandal with grace. Paul Lynde. Paul Lynde lit up Hollywood squares like a disco ball of one-liners and coded jabs. His laugh was unmistakable, his delivery surgical. Beneath the humor, though, was a man wrestling with the loneliness of living behind a mask. A 1965 tragedy, when a companion fell from a San Francisco hotel balcony, haunted him for years. The press sniffed, but never fully exposed. Paul referred to gay bars as church socials and named all his golden retrievers Harry. When a heckler called him a slur in a club early in his career, Lynn snapped back with a punchline so fierce the room erupted. He learned early to weaponize wit, to hide behind it. On Bewitched, he played Uncle Arthur with such flamboyant precision that viewers either laughed or guessed, and rarely both. He never officially came out, but his closest friends knew the pain beneath the camp. When he died at 55, Peter Marshall mourned, "Paul gave the world laughter and kept the tears backstage." Danny Kaye. Danny Kaye was Hollywood's kinetic jester, dancing, singing, and flipping into musical stardom with elastic-faced glee. But backstage, whispers followed him. Diaries from Noel Coward and tales from Vivian Leigh suggested a deep connection, perhaps even a romantic one, with Sir Laurence Olivier. The two men shared hotel rooms during UNICEF tours and often reconnected in London under the guise of charity work. Kaye, married to songwriter Sylvia Fine, remained a doting father but never quelled the rumors. "A rumor," he once said, "is just a story that hasn't found its punchline." His flamboyant onstage persona wasn't an act, it was an extension. He flirted with identity, gender norms, and romance, all through comic timing. His favorite prank? Crashing orchestras, conducting a piece, then vanishing before the conductor returned. When asked later about the Olivier gossip, he smiled. "Sweet, simple, and on repeat, like my Inchworm song." Danny never labeled his heart. He let the music do that. Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier is remembered as the towering genius of classical theater, knighted, Oscar-winning, and etched into history. But offstage, he lived within an intricate web of longing and concealment. Letters from Danny Kaye were said to begin, "Beloved Larry," sealed with inside jokes and puns only they could decipher. Friends recall Olivier's frequent visits to gay-friendly salons and poet soirees where society's masks fell off with the first brandy pour. During World War II, he led a film unit jokingly called the Defense of the Realm and Other Boys Club. His marriage to Vivian Leigh was real, if volatile, but even she was frank about their unconventional affections. Asked about persistent rumors, Olivier deflected. "A true actor bears his soul on stage. Why strip anywhere else?" His memoir left breadcrumbs but no confirmation, just this sly remark. "All the world's a stage, and the stalls are always full of rumor." Olivier's greatest performance may have been the one he never took a bow for. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo's eyes were once described as the camera's greatest crush, but behind that mystique was a woman hiding not from fame, but from expectation. She famously told the press, "I want to be alone." In truth, she wanted to be alone with women she loved. Socialite Mercedes de Acosta, actress Lillian Tashman, and even Marlene Dietrich whispered through the margins of her letters. MGM protected her image like a crown jewel, forbidding interviews, staging accidental shopping photos with men, and even deleting her name from gay scandal columns. Garbo showed up to a 1933 masquerade ball in a tuxedo and danced only with women. She never married. Her love letters, sealed with pressed violets and pet names, spoke volumes. Post-retirement, she walked New York streets in a trench coat and beret, slipping into art theaters like a ghost. When a fan spotted her and stuttered, "You're Greta Garbo," she smiled, "Shh, darling, let's not start a scene," and vanished into the night. She never needed to say it. She lived it. In a town built on illusion, these actors found quiet ways to live their truth, between takes behind curtains, or hidden in love letters never mailed. Their courage wasn't loud, but it endured. Because even in secret, love leaves footprints, and Hollywood's golden shadows are full of them.